Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
The young fortune teller intercepted the wealthy man at the hospital exit. "Check your wife's bag." He smirked, but when he checked the contents at home, he rushed back. The sound of the stretcher's wheels, suddenly coming around the corner of the corridor, caught his attention. Soon, a pale doctor appeared from behind the door labeled operating room, his hands shaking. Near the elevator, someone was loudly arguing, as if people were stuck inside, and even the security guards were running through the hallways, trying to restore order. Bernardo, who had recently turned 35, stood at the hospital exit with a tense expression, trying to focus on his own thoughts. He was the kind of person who was used to calm, clarity, and control over situations, but here, in the noisy and chaotic medical institution, he felt uncomfortable. He had just been informed that Antonio Garcia's father had been successfully operated on. Another day or two, and he would be able to take him home. The news was relatively good, but it left a lingering, unpleasant feeling inside Bernardo. Too much had built up in his life lately. He stepped out of the department to catch his breath and stopped for a moment, leaning against the window sill in the spacious lobby. His mind was filled with thoughts of upcoming business meetings, a recently signed contract, problems with competitors, and his wife Maria, who was going to yet another social event that evening. He couldn't understand why she insisted on these receptions when her father was still in the hospital. But Maria insisted that appearing in society was crucial for their public image. There was, of course, some truth to this. Bernardo ran the family business, successfully expanding its influence, and he was often in the public eye. Coming from an ordinary family, he had achieved great heights, and now any wrong move could cost him dearly. His wife understood that reputation was an inseparable part of their prosperity and always tried to be the queen of the ball. Still, Bernardo felt that behind this excessive public activity, there was something more than just concern for their image. He didn't want to admit to himself that he mistrusted his own wife, but he had already caught himself several times feeling that Maria was hiding something. And then, just as he was about to let go of these nagging suspicions and head to the exit, a petite young woman suddenly blocked his way. She was obviously too young to be working at the hospital or to be part of the staff. She was short, with delicate wrists, dressed in a modest dress, and looked around 18 to 20 years old. Her brown eyes met his with no hint of shyness, and her lips curled into a slight smile. She pressed something like a book or a notebook to her chest with one hand and held a thick white envelope in the other. Her voice came unexpectedly softly, even though chaos filled the corridor. "Check your wife's bag," she said with such confidence, as if speaking about something undoubtedly obvious. Bernardo involuntarily raised an eyebrow. He expected anything, from asking for money to gratitude for sponsoring the hospital, but not this. A nurse approached the girl and almost reproachfully touched her on the shoulder. "Magnolia, what are you doing here? I told you to wait downstairs." "Sorry," she replied briefly, without turning, and continued looking at Bernardo. "Check your wife's bag." Bernardo's mind flashed with indignation. Who did she think she was? What right did she have to tell him what to do? He knew that in hospitals, there were often folk healers, herbalists, and self-proclaimed fortune tellers who tried to extract details of other people's lives for money. Or maybe she was a fraud trying to intimidate him. But there was no fear or trickery in her eyes, just a firm belief. He stepped back resolutely and, trying to maintain his composure, said, "Excuse me, miss, but I don't need any advice. One day, and everything will be clear," she added quietly. The nurse almost forcibly led her away, asking her not to bother anyone. Bernardo only gave a crooked smile. "Check his wife's bag." No way. That sounded like the most absurd thing in the world. Maria's bag, her pride, was filled with an eternal collection of lipsticks, a phone, a wallet, invitations to social events, business cards, and sometimes documents if she helped him with work. But what could possibly be in it that would make people run through hospitals and give warnings? All of this seemed to him like nonsense, unworthy of even a short thought. He waved his hand, walked outside, and got into the car where his driver Bruno was already waiting. "Home, Bruno," he said quietly, fastening his seatbelt. And by the way, let's stop by the bank on the way. I need to sign a couple of documents. Got it, Bruno replied shortly, and smoothly drove the car through the tight flow of traffic. The soft music in the cabin faded into the background. Bernardo occasionally glanced at his phone screen, checking messages. He wanted to make sure everything was under control. A few minutes later, he received an email from his assistant about a scheduled evening call with foreign partners, and he would need to stay connected. He mentally calculated where he would be by that time, most likely at home or already at the office since the day had just started, and there was a lot to do. Yet, some strange unease refused to go away. The words of the young fortune teller, and the doubts that she left him, echoed too loudly in his ears. Check your wife's bag. What if? No, nonsense, he told himself. I'm not going to start self-examination over a random encounter. Yet, the little worm of doubt was already gnawing at him. Over the last couple of weeks, there had indeed been something strange about Maria's behavior. But lying to himself was not Bernardo's style. He always checked the facts and made decisions carefully. He decided not to dwell on it, but when he returned home later, he would quickly glance at her bag. Of course, it seemed crazy, spying on your own wife. But the reasonableness, or lack of it, of this action faded under the weight of thoughts about a possible secret or lie that Maria might be hiding. The first stop of the trip was the bank. The car smoothly parked near the glass building, and Bernardo, overcoming his anxiety, entered. He was immediately recognized. The security guard nodded in greeting. The manager smiled at him. He quickly took care of his business, signed several papers, and discussed the possibility of increasing his credit line. Usually, these visits took him an hour or even an hour and a half. But today, everything went smoothly. Already leaving the building, he felt the vibration of his phone and saw that Maria was calling. Bernardo, hi, his wife's voice had a certain liveliness. I hope everything is fine. How's your father? The surgery went well. A couple of days, and we can take him home. That's great news. I'm very busy today. I have a fitting for tonight's event, then I'm meeting with a friend to discuss some things. Will you be home early? I was planning to stop by, yes. But I'll have to go back to the office afterward. I have a video conference with the investors. I understand. Well, I'll be home closer to the evening. We'll see each other then. Of course, see you, Bernardo replied, trying to add warmth to his voice. He understood Maria less and less lately. Shouldn't it be a priority for her to help him with his father's visit or the work chaos? She seemed to live in a parallel world, where the main stage was cocktail parties, fittings, beauty salons, and endless gatherings. When they first got married, Maria was quite different. He thought she truly shared his aspirations and supported all his endeavors. And now, he wasn't sure where their marriage was headed. Leaving the bank, Bernardo got back into the car with Bruno. Home? The driver asked. Yes, home, he nodded. The office can wait a couple of hours. They drove in silence for a few minutes, while Bernardo turned the thoughts of his wife's bag over in his head. Maybe it was just a coincidence or a strange joke. But he suddenly remembered that he had seen the fortune teller in the hospital corridor before. Once, she had been standing at the same staircase, talking to a patient who seemed to be clearly frightened. Maybe Magnolia, as the nurse called her, just runs around telling people random things. A doctor he had seen once had mentioned that Magnolia was the daughter of one of the nurses, and she had a difficult life. Her father had died in an accident, and her mother couldn't earn enough. Maybe the girl was trying to help people or make some small money with her predictions. But why would she specifically talk about my wife's bag? The question flashed again. Maybe she just recognized me and decided to attach herself to get attention. It's all nonsense. However, inside, the feeling remained that nothing happens by chance. At home, he was greeted only by the on-duty staff. The apartment, or rather the residence given its size, was located in a respectable area. The spacious lobby was usually crowded, but now, in the morning hours, there were no guests. Only the maid Pamela, smiling, handed him tea. Good morning, Senor Garcia. Would you like anything? Please make me some coffee. I need to refresh and work. Of course, it will be ready in a few minutes. Bernardo went to his office, stared at the computer screen, trying to focus on contracts, but the phrase about the bag kept bothering him. He glanced at the clock. Maria should be back late. So, if he was going to check something, now would be the best time. She always had several bags, every day, a clutch for parties, and sometimes others. But what if she took the most expensive one now, and the other one was left at home? He got up, trying to shake off the feeling of guilt. It seemed wrong to go through his wife's things, but the rational part of his mind suggested that it was the only way to get rid of the annoying doubt. After all, she wouldn't know. If everything was clear, there would be no more questions. Finding the right bag turned out to be more difficult than expected. Maria kept them all neatly, but his eye wasn't used to these countless options. Opening the wardrobe, he saw several shelves filled with expensive bags from various brands, but only one, covered in dust, looked like it hadn't been opened in a long time. A couple of others were placed in the most prominent spots, but evidently Maria had taken them to recent events, so anything could be left inside. Bernardo hesitated. Finally, he told himself, I'll check one or two and that's it. I'll make sure there's nothing, and then I'll forget about this nonsense. And that's what he did. The first bag, a classic black one, held nothing unusual: Maria's wallet with a couple of business cards from stylist acquaintances, a restaurant receipt, and some purchase receipts for clothing she'd bought recently. The second clutch, red and much more elegant, only contained a small mirror, an old lipstick, and some other trivial female items. Nothing unusual there either. That's it, he thought with relief. This is madness. I need to stop. But then his gaze fell on the third bag, a brown leather one, which Maria used to love but seemed to have stopped carrying. However, in the past couple of weeks, he'd seen her leave the house with it a few times. Probably for some personal meetings. He reached for the bag, his heart pounding. Shame, a sense of wrongness, it all mixed together. But he mechanically unzipped it and looked inside. Apart from her wallet, phone, and other obvious items, there was a thick, unsigned envelope. The envelope was sealed, but it felt like it contained papers or something resembling documents. Bernardo's heart raced. What if this didn't concern him? Maybe it was personal, secret? But remembering the words of the girl from the hospital, he carefully opened the envelope and, to his astonishment, found copies of some papers that looked like reports or contracts. Additionally, there were a few photographs. The first ones were of Bernardo surrounded by influential people, clearly taken at some business event. A couple of other shots, Maria with an unfamiliar man. The photos were clearly taken secretly. Maria and this man were sitting in a cafe. It all looked friendly, but the man was holding her hand. What the hell? Bernardo blurted out aloud. He couldn't understand where this had come from or why Maria was keeping such photographs. The man vaguely reminded him of someone from his competitors or partners. Maybe this gentleman had been trying to establish contact with him, and Maria had wanted to tell him about it, but recalling their recent conversations, he didn't remember her mentioning meetings with strangers. Besides the photos, the envelope also contained printed emails with threats. Judging by the text, someone was blackmailing a woman named Arv Gonzalez, demanding money or information about Bernardo's business. No direct confessions, but the overall tone of the emails made his hair stand on end. Don't forget what will happen if you don't keep your promise. Your husband won't find out if you follow the conditions, wrote the anonymous sender. Signing as D.D. Bernardo immediately understood that this was serious. It turned out his wife might be involved in some dark story. He carefully folded the papers back, sealed the envelope, trying to preserve its original appearance. I need to talk to her, and urgently. But if she's hiding something, she's unlikely to admit it easily, he thought, feeling anger and confusion rising within him. The whole day passed in a blur. Bernardo went into his office, trying to work on documents, but nothing was getting through to him. He barely managed to handle a few calls, fumbling his words. At one point, his business partner Rafael Iglesias called and asked if everything was okay because Bernardo usually showed more enthusiasm. Bernardo didn't go into details, replying that everything was fine and that he was just worried about his father's health. But in his mind, questions crowded in. Why Maria? Why was she hiding something? Or maybe someone had planted those papers in her bag, and she didn't even know. However, the photographs had clearly been taken intentionally, and the emails seemed to be hers. There were several email addresses, some of them starting with Maria's initials. For a moment, Bernardo even wondered, maybe she was trying to help him by investigating something? But the text of the emails suggested blackmail, that she had promised something. Watching the clock became unbearable. Time stretched out painfully. He decided he would talk to her as soon as she got home. However, Maria's phone had been unanswered all day. She only sent a short message. I'm running late. The meeting is taking longer. I'll be home closer tonight. She didn't specify any details. He ground his teeth and thought, I should reach out to my contacts in security, get everything checked. But first, I'll hear her explanation. At some point, he remembered the young fortune teller. So her warning wasn't a fabrication. The girl knew something important would be in the bag. But how? She must have seen Maria in the hospital or talked to someone, maybe overheard some conversations. Everything started to take shape, no mysticism, just a coincidence, perhaps some awareness. Okay, Bernardo said to himself, I'll have to go back to the hospital and try to find that girl. Maybe she knows more than she told me? Deciding not to waste time, he quickly called Bruno to take him to the hospital. He felt he couldn't sit at home and keep wondering, he needed to act. Bruno, we need to go to the city clinic where my father is, he said into the phone, trying to keep his voice calm. Yes, of course, the driver's voice replied. 2 minutes, I'll be at the door. By the time Bernardo returned to the hospital corridors, it was already late evening. The lights in some rooms were dimmed. The duty staff and nurses were yawning at the registration desk, and from his father's room, they informed him that Antonio Garcia was sleeping after his injections. Bernardo quietly entered and stood by his father's bed. Antonio Garcia was breathing evenly, his face was calm, he was clearly feeling better. Everything will be fine soon, Bernardo thought with some bitterness. Nearby, the nurse he had seen in the morning was sitting at the post, short, plump, with a warm gaze. He approached her. Excuse me, you took a girl away today. Magnolia, I think. Could you tell me where I can find her? The nurse furrowed her brow. Are you talking about my daughter? Yes, her name is Magnolia. And why do you need her? I wanted to talk. She said something to me today that turned out to be important. The nurse seemed concerned that Magnolia might have offended someone or received complaints. Magnolia didn't mean any harm to anyone. She's a strange girl, loves to predict, speak in riddles. I'm sorry if she frightened or upset you. No, Bernardo hurried to reassure her. I have no complaints. It's just that her words turned out to be useful. I wanted to know where she got that information from. The nurse hesitated, then said with some pride and concern. She doesn't know where it comes from, she just feels it. She's been like that since childhood. But if you want to talk to her, she's already left. She has college early tomorrow. College? Bernardo was surprised, imagining that the fortune teller hadn't even finished her studies yet. Yes, she studies when she can, but she often misses classes because she has to help me, or she just runs off when she has a vision, the woman said with a bitter smile. I don't know what to do anymore, honestly. I'm afraid it'll get her into trouble one day. Could you give me her phone number? She doesn't have a mobile. I can't afford a good smartphone, and the simplest one, she won't carry, she says she doesn't need it. But if it's really important, come by tomorrow morning, she'll probably be here or at our house nearby. Bernardo, although feeling impatient, understood that nothing could be done late at night. He nodded. Okay. Tomorrow morning. Thank you. All he could do now was return home and wait for Maria. On the way, He thought about how he would start the conversation with her. Maybe he should just show her the envelope right away or try to steer the conversation so that she would admit something on her own. But knowing Maria's character, she could talk her way out of anything. He doubted it would be easy. At home, it was empty, the floors reflected the light, and the silence seemed hollow. Only Pamela, the maid, asked if Bernardo wanted anything for dinner. He declined, feeling that he couldn't swallow a bite. There was no point sitting in the living room. He went to his office and turned on his laptop, going through the history of old deals, trying to find any mention of the name DD. Maybe it was one of his recent partners, a competitor, a blackmailer. He scrolled through the database but found nothing. The clock struck 11 p.m., then midnight, and Maria still hadn't appeared. Thoughts of possible betrayal tore at his mind. Bernardo sat on the couch, staring into space. What if she really had an affair or, worse, got involved in a conspiracy to steal something important for the firm? And those photos. He didn't want to believe that his wife was capable of this. But the facts spoke for themselves. The sound of the front door lock clicked. Bernardo got up and went to the hallway. Maria stood there, pulling off her coat, tired but fully made up. Her dress flowed around her figure as if she had just stepped off a runway. Her lipstick still shimmered on her lips, and there was a faint spark of excitement in her eyes. It seemed like the night had been quite interesting. "You're not sleeping?" she asked, surprised. "Yes, I've been waiting for you." "Sorry, I'm late. The meeting ran long." "Is everything okay?" She tilted her head, showing concern. He suddenly felt afraid to say everything right then. He felt anger rising inside but decided to wait a little longer and give her a chance to say something. He answered, "No, everything's not okay, Maria. Let's sit down. I want to talk about us." She carefully hung up her coat, took off her shoes, and walked into the living room. There, she sat on the edge of the couch, looking at him warily. "You're very serious. Is something wrong? Is it about your father?" "Father is fine," Bernardo replied briefly. "I'd like to know where you were all day." She smiled, as though relieved that the question was just about that. "Well, I told you, a fitting, then meeting with a friend. We were discussing plans for our charity event. Then my friend kept me longer. We were going to do a photo shoot, but it all got delayed." "What's so unusual about that?" Bernardo looked her straight in the eye, trying to catch any sign of falsehood. "And that's it?" he asked again. "No other meetings?" "No," Maria looked away as if trying to remember. "Well, we stopped by a restaurant to discuss catering, but that wasn't really a meeting, more of a business discussion." "And you didn't think about visiting your father, the one who just had surgery and needs support?" "Sorry, it never even occurred to me that my presence there was needed," she frowned. "I thought you were handling everything, and we had agreed that I would deal with social matters, and you would handle the business." He stood up, walking back and forth across the room, unable to contain his growing anger. "Maria," he finally said, "you have no idea what I found today." She tensed, but tried to hide it behind a curious gaze. "Did you find my old credit card with an expired limit or something like that?" "No, I found something that explains your strange behavior lately." He spoke coldly, as though reprimanding an employee. "Here it is." He extended the envelope to her. Maria took it, and fear crossed her face when she realized what was inside. "Why were you rummaging through my things?" she said reproachfully, but her voice trembled. "Is that the main issue?" Bernardo raised his voice. "Explain to me what these papers are. What are these photos? Who's that guy in the picture? Why is he blackmailing you? And what did you promise him?" "I didn't promise him anything," Maria shouted, interrupting him. Her eyes flashed, and a lump formed in her throat. "It's all wrong. I don't even understand what's going on." "You don't understand?" he asked sarcastically. "But the letter is addressed to you. It's clear that some DD is threatening you and demanding something, maybe information about me or the company's finances. Is that true?" She bit her lip and looked down. "I'm scared." So, you do know about this? Yes, but I didn't want to tell you because I wasn't sure how serious it was. At first, I received one letter, return the debt, or we'll tell your husband everything. I thought it was a mistake, I didn't know anything. But then they sent me photos and said that if I didn't give them the information they wanted, they would send the photos to the tabloid press. There you are, and I am, and that man. It looks like we're having an affair. Is it true? Bernardo cut her off harshly. No, she nervously clasped her hands. You see, it's all because he's my former classmate. We ran into each other by accident, had lunch at a cafe. Maybe someone took the pictures or he arranged it to blackmail me later. But why? He said he wanted to invest in your business, but he needed additional access to finances. Of course, I refused, after which the threats began that your reputation would be ruined. Why didn't you tell me? Bernardo asked coldly. I was scared. I thought I could handle it on my own. She covered her face with her hands. I didn't want you to think I betrayed you or that we actually had something. And I didn't even believe it would go this far. Maria, he softened, seeing how she was nearly crying, but his hurt was too strong. You understand that these things can't be handled alone. You've put both yourself and me in danger. I know, she whispered, lifting her tear-filled eyes. But I kept thinking it would all end on its own. Bernardo ran his hand over his face, sighing. Okay, calm down, we'll figure this out. But first, you'll tell me all the details. When did he write to you? How did he get your email? How did he find you? And tell me his name. His name is Daniel Diaz. We used to study together in the management course at a financial college. Then I dropped out, married you, and he disappeared from the scene. Suddenly, a few months ago, we ran into each other at a business center. He came up, we started talking, he said he worked in investments, that he had a proposal for your company. I gave him my number just as a contact, maybe he really had an interesting idea. But then he started sending strange messages, asking questions about your business, your plans, asking for personal meetings. I went a couple of times, thinking you'd be happy if I found new partners. And then one day he said he had compromising material on me, that there were photos of us supposedly too close, and he hinted that he needed something, details about your partnership with foreign investors. Maria's voice faltered. I got scared because he could really tarnish everything. And you're in the spotlight, there's an important deal. I didn't know what to do. She took a quick breath and covered her face. Bernardo looked away. It was hard for him to process all of this at once. But deep down, he could see that Maria was telling the truth now, her way of explaining the facts, the tremor in her voice, it wasn't feigned. He sat next to her, though trying to maintain some distance. Okay, he said finally. You kept these papers in your bag? Why? I can't explain. He sent me the envelope by courier, told me to think about his proposal. If I didn't want to cooperate, he promised to post everything online. I didn't know where to hide it, so I put it in my bag. I was afraid you'd find it by accident. And I couldn't just throw it away or burn it. What if it became necessary as evidence if I decided to go to the police? So why didn't you go to the police right away? What would I have said? That some guy is blackmailing me with photos of us sitting in a cafe? The police isn't a guarantee the photos won't leak. And if it went to court, the scandal would still come out, and your reputation would be ruined either way. I decided to buy some time. Bernardo sighed heavily. I understand. Now I'm starting to guess what that girl at the hospital meant. It looks like she was talking about this. Check your wife's bag. Someone warned her. Maybe she overheard, maybe she knew Daniel, or somehow else. But one way or another, she was right. Maria looked at her husband in confusion. Which girl? It's a long story. Tomorrow I'll try to find her and figure out what she knows. But one thing's clear, we can't let this scumbag ruin our lives. Bernardo, forgive me, Maria suddenly whispered, pressing against him. I really didn't want things to turn out this way. I just stupidly tried to solve the problem on my own. He hugged her, feeling her tremble all over. Despite the hurt and disappointment, he understood that she was scared now, and this wasn't a game. Okay, I'm not judging you. We all make mistakes, but this needs to be fixed. Tomorrow, I'll call my security contacts, check out this Daniel, figure out what he's about, and then we'll decide how to act. Maybe we'll dig up some dirt on him. Yes, Maria agreed, wiping away tears. Just please, don't be mad at me. I'm still mad, Bernardo admitted. But now's not the time to deal with our relationship. Right now, there's a threat. We need to minimize the damage. They talked some more about the blackmail details, how Maria hadn't paid any money, only once transferred a small sum to, as she put it, settle the issue. But Daniel kept demanding more. Bernardo promised to keep it together and not start a scene, but inside, everything was boiling. He couldn't believe their marriage had come to this. When Maria went to the bedroom to change, Bernardo opened his laptop, checked her correspondence. They had a shared password for the family email, but it seemed that Daniel had been emailing her on a different address. Trying to trace the information through indirect clues, he found nothing, which meant Maria had likely created a separate email specifically to keep it hidden from him. No surprise there, since she had been hiding the situation. Then, he waited until Maria fell asleep and went to bed for a brief, uneasy sleep, but after a couple of hours, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. By morning, he hadn't closed his eyes at all. At dawn, Bernardo quietly got up, trying not to wake his wife, dressed, and called Bruno. It seemed like it wasn't the first time Bruno had been called out this early. Half an hour later, they were at the hospital entrance. The corridors were still sleepy, patients were just waking up, and nurses were starting their morning rounds. Bernardo went in search of Magnolia. The same nurse who had been on duty earlier looked at him with mild surprise. "You're here so early? Good morning." "Good morning. I'd like to speak with your daughter." "I understand, but she's still sleeping. I've just finished my night shift, and she's at home. If you want, I can give you her address." "Is that possible?" "Yes, but please don't do anything bad to her, okay? She's sensitive and might get scared." Bernardo couldn't help but smile bitterly. "No, of course not. I just need to understand how she knew. Maybe she can help." The nurse took a pen, wrote down the address on a piece of paper, and handed it to him. "It's very close, just a couple of blocks away. She probably hasn't left yet. She only has classes in college after lunch today." Bernardo thanked her and called Bruno to drive him to the given address. The building was modest, an old house without a concierge. The smell of dampness lingered in the stairwell. Bernardo carefully climbed to the 4th floor and rang the doorbell. A slender middle-aged man, likely renting another room or a neighbor, opened the door. Bernardo said he was looking for Magnolia, and the man silently pointed to the next door in the hallway. Bernardo knocked. A minute later, the door opened slightly, and a wary face appeared. It was Magnolia. Upon seeing Bernardo, her eyes widened in surprise, but she wasn't scared. "You? Why are you here?" "We need to talk," Bernardo said quietly. "I assure you, I won't harm you. I just need to understand how you knew about my wife and her bag." Magnolia bit her lip, thought for a moment, then nodded and let him in. The apartment was small, with simple decor. In the hallway, shoes and coats were tightly packed. The room she led him to had an old couch and a table with worn-out chairs. Magnolia sat on the couch and gestured for Bernardo to sit in a chair. "I know what you're thinking," she began quietly, "that I'm just some crazy fortune teller. But I really did hear how my mom and another staff member were talking about how your wife brings envelopes to the hospital. They saw something, how she went to see you or your father. I don't know. I thought it was strange, so I started eavesdropping on conversations in the hallways. Someone said they saw your wife talking to a suspicious person in the lobby. Then one of the attendants said she's probably plotting something against her husband. At first, I didn't believe it, but the next time I saw you, I suddenly decided to warn you. I don't know how to explain it. It's not mystical. I just often notice details and then draw conclusions. So you just pieced the facts together? Bernardo asked. Yes. You see, I like observing people, and it seemed like you were in danger. Then everything kind of clicked. I realized the key was in your wife's bag. Bernardo grimaced, realizing there was no mysticism here. Magnolia just had a sharp mind, curiosity, and, it seemed, a kind of empathy, able to pick up on other people's fears. Okay, he replied, trying to speak gently. So you overheard a conversation and figured there might be compromising things in there? Yes, from what I heard in snippets, she carries some documents. I figured they could either be for you or against you. Since you were so worried by the operating room, it seemed like something serious was going on in your family. Bernardo sighed. Magnolia, thank you for the warning. You were right, there really were strange things in the bag. It helped me react in time. The girl smiled with relief. I'm glad. Sorry if I overstepped, but I couldn't stay silent. It's okay. Tell me, have you ever heard the name Daniel Diaz or the initials DD? No, I haven't heard, Magnolia thought for a moment, rubbing her forehead. Maybe the people who said they saw your wife with someone know his name, but they didn't mention it. I see. Thank you. If you find out anything else, could I leave my phone number? Call me if you hear something important. Of course, Magnolia shrugged. I can pass it to my mom if you're at the hospital. Bernardo wrote down his number on a piece of paper and handed it to her. In Magnolia's eyes was a slight confusion, as if she wasn't used to dealing with such influential and wealthy people, and now suddenly they were coming to her. One more question, he added. Why does everyone call you a fortune teller? She smiled sadly. I once got into tarot cards, palm reading. I like making up stories, telling people things to support them. And now everyone calls me fortune teller Magnolia. My mom scolds me, says it's not serious, but I'm not a bad person, really. I just often sense when people are in trouble. I understand. If you need anything, you can call me anytime. I'm grateful for all this. Magnolia smiled warmly. Okay, thank you. Bernardo got up and said goodbye. As he left the apartment, he felt a strange sense of relief, as though part of the puzzle had fallen into place. No mysticism, no supernatural, just a chain of coincidences and the attentiveness of a girl who had saved him from discovering the blackmail too late. Everything happened quickly after that. Bernardo called his acquaintance Diego Martinez, a former law enforcement officer who now ran a security agency. He asked him to gather information about Daniel Diaz, addresses, work, connections. Diego replied that he would take care of it immediately and would let him know by the evening. Then, Bernardo went to the office. He needed to hold a few meetings, but he kept getting distracted, waiting for a call from Diego. When he arrived in his office, he thought about what the best course of action would be. If Daniel was blackmailing Maria, threatening to publish compromising material, should he contact him directly? Perhaps it would be better to pretend that Maria was still going along with his demands, then set a trap. At lunch, Bernardo's old friend and business partner Rafael Iglesias, tall, with sharp features but a friendly smile, stopped by his office. He immediately noticed something was wrong. Listen, Bernardo, you're not yourself today. What's going on? Problems with the deal? Bernardo hesitated, unsure if he should tell him. To be honest, it's personal. Well, if you want, I'll listen. Maybe I can give you some advice? We've been through a lot together. Bernardo sighed heavily. I found out that my wife is being blackmailed by some guy. He has a photo where she supposedly has a romantic relationship with him, and he's threatening to leak it to the media to ruin her reputation. Plus, he's asking for information about my business. Raphael's eyes widened. What an asshole. What are you going to do? I've already hired people to gather information about him. After that, I'll decide. Most likely, I'll propose a meeting. I'm not going to let him strangle me like this. Raphael snorted. We need to act decisively. If you need my help, let me know. I have connections. Thanks, I'll manage for now, but I'll keep you updated. The whole day, Bernardo was tense. By evening, he received a call from Diego. Diego conspiratorially told him that he had uncovered something about Daniel Diaz. He was indeed involved in investments, but apparently not entirely legal ones. He has a small network of one-day firms. He was previously involved in securities fraud but got away with just a fine. He has few connections, but there are a few shady individuals around him. It looks like Diaz is a classic small-time con artist who just wanted to score big by blackmailing your wife, Diego concluded. I think we need to press him. I can arrange a meeting with him in a secure location. Bernardo nodded, even though Diego couldn't see him. All right, let's meet tomorrow. I want him to understand that we won't dance to his tune. Also, it's better to gather evidence of his extortion, so if necessary, we can hand it over to the police. No problem, Diego confirmed. I'll take care of it. After finishing the call, Bernardo sighed. Now there was a plan. He called Maria into his office and told her what he intended to do. She sat nervously, fiddling with the edge of her blouse. Do you think he could become dangerous? Maybe, Bernardo replied honestly. That's why Diego's security team will be with me. He doesn't have any powerful backers, so he probably won't go to extreme measures. Maria looked at her husband with concern. Do you need me there? Maybe, but only if you're ready to face him. If you don't want to, I'll handle it. She paused, looking down. I'm scared, but I want to support you, and I want him to know that I'm not afraid of his threats anymore. If you're there, it will be easier for me. Bernardo placed his hand on her shoulder. All right, we'll handle this together. Meanwhile, Daniel continued sending Maria messages and even calling. Following Bernardo's advice, she didn't respond until their agreed time. Bernardo told her to send a text saying she was ready to meet but wanted to discuss the details in person. Daniel eagerly agreed and suggested one of the expensive restaurants in the city center. Bernardo just shook his head. It seemed the con artist didn't think he could be exposed. The next evening, Bernardo and Antonio arrived at the agreed place. They hadn't even gotten out of the car when two members of Diego's security team approached them. They were discreet, dressed in casual clothes, but ready for any surprises. Bernardo told them to keep their distance until a threat arose. Maria looked tense, but she pulled herself together. Bernardo, dressed in a sharp suit, walked alongside her, and from the outside, they looked like just an ordinary couple heading to dinner. The restaurant inside was luxurious, waiters in white shirts, tables set with expensive tablecloths and flickering candles. They chose a table in the far corner, as arranged with Daniel. Soon, he appeared, a young man, around 35, well-groomed, with a neatly trimmed beard and wearing a pricey jacket. He walked toward them with an openly smug expression. Hello, Maria. Well, hello, Bernardo. Didn't expect to see you here. But it's better this way, we can sort things out right away. Bernardo shot him a piercing look. Sit down. Daniel sat down, glanced around with mild concern, but apparently decided there was nothing to fear since he couldn't see the security guards. A cocky smile played on his face as he addressed Maria. I'm glad you decided to come. I thought I'd have to make the materials public to push you. Bernardo's insides boiled, and he spoke up. Listen, Diaz, we understand perfectly what you want, but I'm warning you, your threats won't have the desired effect. We're not afraid of a scandal and are ready to go to court. Besides, we already know about your past and your shady schemes. Daniel smirked and casually took out his phone. Maybe you're not afraid, but I'm not either. You see, right now I can post photos, videos, and correspondence, everything I have. You'll be right in the middle of a scandal. Are you ready for that? Maria flinched, but gathered herself and replied. If you think we'll dance to your tune, you're wrong. Think about it, this won't bring anything good for you either. Oh, we'll see about that. Daniel sneered. Bernardo, You've been doing well in business lately. You've closed some big deals, right? I'm sure the press loves those kinds of stories. The wife of a billionaire runs off with a young lover. Diego in the cafe, the photos, everything is so spicy. Rumors spread fast. You've planned it all out, Bernardo said coldly, but I have something on you too. Your scams, your ties to criminal organizations. If I start digging into that, you'll end up in prison. Daniel briefly pressed his lips together but didn't show any signs of fear. Let's say you have something. But believe me, it's not so easy to tie me to any companies. All the legal paperwork is done with fronts. I've been through stuff like this before and came out unscathed. Bernardo nodded calmly. All right, but there's always a way to expose a fraudster. Daniel chuckled. Let's get to the point. What do I want? Let Maria just give me some information about your latest investor so I can make the right investment and make money off the inside info. It's not that much, right? And you'll avoid the noise. You want to trade insider information? Bernardo asked again. Do you realize that's illegal? And who's going to prove it? Maria could just arrange a meeting and give me info that can easily be found if you know where to look. But it'll be much faster if she has access to the database. She probably has some, since she's your wife. This is outrageous. Bernardo exclaimed. You're asking her to commit an economic crime. Daniel shrugged, pretending to be indifferent. Everyone makes money the way they can. Either that, or I press the send button, and your reputation will be devoured by the tabloids. Think about it. Maria wanted to say something, but Bernardo placed his hand on her shoulder to stop her, then spoke calmly. All right, let's imagine we agree. How will it look? Daniel's eyes lit up with greed. Very simple, you give me the information I need, and I'll erase all the materials. You can even make sure I delete everything from my phone, from the cloud, wherever. But, of course, I'll need to make sure your information is real, not fake. I understand, Bernardo nodded and exchanged a glance with Antonio. But for that, we'll need one more meeting. There will be documents. Perfect, Daniel realized he was getting what he wanted. When and where? Tomorrow, let's say at noon. Is that convenient? I can adjust. He sighed with feigned indifference. Then text me where and how we'll meet. Bernardo named a building that was actually under Diego's control. He had already promised to prepare the necessary equipment for recording the conversation and ensuring the participants' safety. Daniel nodded in satisfaction and, getting up from the table, added, It's a pleasure to deal with smart people. See you tomorrow. Just don't try to fool me. I have secret channels that can send everything out if anything happens to me. Don't worry, Bernardo replied coldly. We'll settle everything tomorrow. Daniel left, still unfazed and self-assured. Bernardo and Maria exchanged glances, and she quietly said, He doesn't believe we can stand up to him. But we will, Bernardo answered firmly. Tomorrow it will all end. Diego met them outside and shook his head. What a guy. I heard everything. We've recorded the conversation with him in the restaurant. So we already have evidence of his blackmail. But for a stronger case, it's better to capture the moment when he demands specific information in exchange for silence. Tomorrow, we'll have the chance to record that clearly. I understand, Bernardo nodded. The problem is, he'll probably have company. He says he has his own channels. We'll be prepared, Diego reassured him. If he brings people, my guys will be on standby. When they got home, Bernardo and Maria didn't say much. Each of them was lost in thoughts about the upcoming meeting. Maria timidly asked, Are you really angry with me? Less than before. Now, the most important thing is to resolve this, and afterward, we'll discuss what comes next, Bernardo answered, trying not to escalate the tension. He understood that they would need to have a serious conversation about mutual trust and how to move forward. But right now, the priority was to end this blackmail. The next morning, Bernardo received instructions from Diego. At noon, they all met in an empty office space in a business center. It belonged to Bernardo's holding, but was not in use yet. Cameras and microphones were set up in advance, and the entrance/exit was organized so the security guards could stay nearby. Daniel arrived alone, or at least he appeared to be without any escort. He looked around the space, a bit gloomy. "Are you sure no one will catch us here?" Bernardo stepped forward. "We need privacy. You wanted confidentiality, didn't you?" Daniel nodded and immediately got to the point. "Well, did you bring the documents? Where are the guarantees that this is real information?" Bernardo handed him a folder containing copies of fake contracts that looked very convincing and said, "Take a look. This is more than enough to get into a partnership project if you know how to work the data. You can check it out." Daniel pulled out a copy, skimmed through it, and smiled with satisfaction. It seemed authentic. "Great, so I get this, and I disappear from your life, erase the compromising material." "Yes," Bernardo said firmly. "But we have a counter condition. You delete everything right now in front of us, and we want to see you clean out the cloud storage and emails." "No problem," Daniel laughed, seeing everything going according to his plan. "I've come prepared. Look," he pulled out his smartphone, turned it on, and began showing that he was deleting files, photos, and messages. Then, he went into some cloud settings and deleted things there. "Everything seems clean now." "So, are we square?" he asked smugly, adjusting his collar. "Because I still have plenty of plans." Bernardo pretended everything was fine. But then Maria spoke up. "Daniel, now you'll leave me alone." "Of course, darling," he smiled, as if it were all so simple. "It was nice meeting up after all these years. But yes, our little story is over. Thanks for the cooperation." At that moment, Bernardo signaled, and two of Diego's team entered the room. Daniel flinched, but they quickly took control of the situation. Diego appeared right behind them. "Mr. Diaz, we've recorded everything, your demands, your blackmail. We have excellent material to hand you over to the police." "What? This is illegal." Daniel paled sharply. "You don't have the right to record me without my permission." "We do," Diego said calmly. "This space belongs to the owner, who consented to the video recording. As for your criminal actions, that's your problem." Daniel nervously squirmed, trying to break free, but the security guards held him. "Bernardo," he hissed, turning to Bernardo, "you're not going to give this to the police, are you? Think of the scandal." "Are you worried about the scandal?" Bernardo sneered coldly. "What about the scandal you threatened me with? I'll decide what to do when we're sure you're no longer a threat." I have something to offer." Daniel became agitated, realizing he was trapped. "I have connections. I can help you." "I don't need help from a con artist." Bernardo cut him off harshly. "Go think about what you'll tell the investigator." Maria stepped back, covering her face with her hands. She couldn't watch as Daniel was literally handcuffed. But Diego warned her. "Stay calm, everything is under control." Two security guards led Daniel out of the room. Diego went with them to hand him over to the police. Bernardo and Maria were left in the empty room. He looked into her eyes. "It's over. He's no longer a threat to us. We'll give the recordings to the police, they'll handle it. My lawyers are already prepared to file a lawsuit for blackmail and extortion." Maria quietly asked, "And what if this comes out in the press?" "It might, yes," he answered. "But it's not as scary now. We'll move everything to an official domain. Blackmail, fraudster, con artist, people will understand who's right and who's wrong." She lowered her head. "I regret not doing this sooner. What's done is done. It could have been worse." They left the building. Bernardo felt a weight lift off his shoulders, but a sense of betrayal still lingered inside. Not in the literal sense, but a betrayal of trust. He needed to talk to Maria about their future, But now that the threat had passed, he just wanted to breathe in some fresh air and feel a little bit of relief. "Bernardo," she said quietly when they got into the car. "Let's talk. I need to explain why all this happened." He nodded at the driver to wait and turned to her. "I'm listening." "You see," she began, "I often felt like you saw me as just an ornament in your life." Tears sparkled in her eyes. "Like my role was to appear at events, be the beautiful wife, but you didn't trust me to get involved in anything real. I wanted to prove that I could be useful, find investors, partners, and I stupidly got tangled up in this mess with Daniel." Bernardo sighed. "Maybe I really did push you away from the business. I didn't want to burden you with business troubles, thinking you wouldn't be interested." "Exactly, but I wanted to be involved, to know what you were living through. But in the end, I fell into this trap. He seemed like someone who could help your projects, and you'd appreciate my initiative. I didn't realize how he was luring me into his trap." He gently took her hand. "We're both to blame. I should have paid more attention to your ideas, and you should have shared with me as soon as you realized something wasn't right." Maria sniffled. "Yes, I'm afraid this lack of trust will ruin our marriage. It won't ruin it if we learn to talk to each other. I don't want to lose you, Maria. But let's face it, we need to rebuild our relationship." She nodded, wiping away her tears. "I'm ready. I love you, and I don't want to lie anymore. And I don't want to underestimate you or keep you in the shadows," Bernardo added. "Let's just say we've both learned our lessons." They exchanged a look that conveyed reconciliation and a desire to move forward. A few days passed. The story with Daniel was handed over to the police. He behaved in different ways. Sometimes he denied everything, other times he threatened. But since all the recordings confirmed the blackmail, the investigation had enough grounds. The media hadn't yet caught wind of the scandal, and Bernardo and his lawyers did everything to legally and properly defend their reputation. In parallel, Bernardo hired a team of specialists to check all of Maria's digital activity, making sure Daniel hadn't copied the compromising material elsewhere. Fortunately, all the original files he had were localized. After the incident, Bernardo invited Maria to a serious conversation about their involvement in the business. He decided that she should take a small role in one of his new projects, not formally, but by actually participating in the work so she could feel needed, make decisions, and contribute. Maria agreed enthusiastically. It was new to her, but she was ready to learn and work. The same day they signed the first documents, officially making her a public relations advisor for one of the company's divisions. Bernardo decided to visit his father at the hospital and tell him about their new plans. His father was recovering, looking much better and smiling. Bernardo didn't go into details about the blackmail story. He simply said that everything had been sorted out and that he and Maria would be working together now. As he left his father's room, he remembered Magnolia and decided to stop by the nurse's station. The nurse smiled at him. "How's your father?" "Better. He'll be discharged soon." "Is Magnolia here?" "Yes, she's in the resident's office working part-time." "Should I call her?" "If you can." A minute later, Magnolia came out, smiling, though she looked a bit shy. "Hello," Bernardo greeted her. "I wanted to thank you for everything." "I didn't really do anything special," she lowered her eyes. "No, you did," he gently disagreed. "If it hadn't been for your warning, I might not have known what was happening for a long time. Our family owes you a lot. I'd like to help you. Do you have any dreams? Education? Work?" Magnolia shrugged, looking confused. "I'd like to finish my studies to become a psychologist, but my mom doesn't have the money, and I'm in college right now. I was thinking of working as a nurse. If you really want to continue your studies, I can pay for your tuition when the time comes, or I can help you get a scholarship." "Really?" Magnolia's eyes widened with joy and disbelief. "But why?" "I want you to be able to develop your talent for empathy, for understanding people. If you become a psychologist, you can help people professionally, not just read their palms." Magnolia's lips trembled, and she nodded shyly. "Thank you so much. This is so unexpected. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Just think about it. If you decide yes, here's my number. Call me, and I'll arrange the scholarship or grant. With these words, he handed her his business card, and she took it delicately with her slender fingers. I'll definitely think about it. You're very kind. I'm just grateful, Bernardo corrected her. Good luck, Magnolia. He said goodbye and left the hospital feeling that he had closed an important chapter in his life. Although he decided not to call it a chapter, since he didn't want to divide the story into parts. A lot had happened recently, and these events made him reconsider both his view of life and his family relationships. When he got back to the car, he called Maria. Hi, how's everything at the office? Unusual, she laughed, her voice light with cheer. But I'm trying to get the hang of it. Good job. Let's have dinner together tonight and celebrate this new chapter. Sure. Will you pick me up? Of course. I'll be there in a couple of hours. After hanging up, he smiled. There would be challenges ahead, since working together could bring tension, and they would have to balance their personal and professional lives. But now, at least, they wouldn't hide secrets from each other. Bernardo had an instinctive sense that their relationship would grow stronger if they could get through this period. Meanwhile, Daniel was facing an investigation, and soon a trial. He might try to wriggle out of it, but this time, Bernardo had every right to seek justice. The media barely latched onto the story, thanks in large part to timely actions and Bernardo's media connections. A couple of articles reported that a con artist had tried to blackmail the Gonzalez family, but there was no major scandal. Everything quieted down fairly quickly. A couple of weeks later, Bernardo's father fully recovered and was discharged. Maria and her husband made sure to shower him with care. There was no more need to visit the hospital, and so Bernardo only stopped by once to deliver flowers and a small gift to the nurse, Magnolia's mother. The girl wasn't there that day, she was already attending college. Bernardo left a note that the offer to help was still open. When Maria found out, she just smiled. I think you've embarked on a path of charity. Maybe, Bernardo replied. Sometimes you help people, and it comes back in a good way. His wife agreed, and they decided that in the new division of the company, they could set up an internship program for young professionals who couldn't afford education. The idea for this charitable initiative came thanks to Magnolia's story. A month later, the case against Daniel was officially closed with a guilty verdict. He tried to defend himself, but the court sentenced him for extortion. His involvement in several fraud schemes was confirmed. The verdict was a suspended sentence with restrictions on his freedom and a large fine. But the most important thing was that he could no longer legally pursue investment activities, and this time, he couldn't escape unscathed. Maria sighed with relief, and Bernardo felt that justice had finally been served. Meanwhile, a new order had settled in their home. Maria no longer disappeared at endless events, and when she did attend them, it was often with Bernardo, representing their shared interests. Now that she was working on public projects, her energy had found the right outlet. Bernardo saw her flourishing, realizing herself not just as the beautiful wife of a billionaire, but as a partner, someone who could come up with and implement new ideas. One evening, as they sat in the living room after dinner, Maria unexpectedly spoke up. Bernardo, do you remember, we once wanted to get involved in charity work back when we first got married? He looked up from reading the financial report. Yes, you wanted to open some kind of foundation, I remember. Well, maybe now is the right time to revisit that. We have the resources, and it seems like you're more open to charity now. He smiled. Yes, that's true. I've been thinking about it. Let's discuss the details soon and set up a foundation. For example, we could help people like Magnolia who can't afford to study because of financial issues, or just support talented young people. Maria nodded approvingly. This is how the tense phase in their relationship slowly began to fade. Of course, they still had to overcome some awkward moments, especially regarding trust, because deep down, Bernardo still occasionally remembered that his wife had hidden important things from him. But seeing her sincere efforts and how she avoided past mistakes was the best proof of her remorse. Maria understood that Bernardo was also changing, giving her more freedom to realize her potential. One evening, as they were returning from a business dinner, Maria looked at her husband. "Are you happy?" He shrugged. "Let's just say, I feel like everything is finally on the right track. We're together, we're growing, there's no more hidden tension, that's close to happiness." She laughed. "Sometimes I feel like you don't like talking about feelings. But I feel it too. I used to be afraid to show weakness, emotions. I thought a man should be tough. Now I realize that openness is not a weakness, but part of true strength." And so they lived on, gradually finding a new understanding with each other. Bernardo continued running his business, facing many challenges, while Maria helped him with social events and charity programs, increasingly becoming involved not just as a passive figure, but as a full partner. As for Magnolia, 6 months later she called Bernardo and, stammering with excitement, confessed that she still wanted to become a psychologist and asked if his offer was still valid. Bernardo kept his word. He helped her get into university and arranged all the paperwork for a special scholarship. Magnolia's mother was moved to tears, and the young woman promised to do everything she could to justify the trust placed in her. Sometimes people joked that Bernardo might not believe in miracles, but he had his fairy in the form of the young fortune teller. But he knew that everything could be logically explained by coincidence and Magnolia's attention. Life sometimes plays strange scenarios that seem mystical, but in reality, they are the result of intersecting human fates. Winter passed, and one of the most anticipated moments arrived. Bernardo's father fully recovered and decided to celebrate his recovery. He gathered all his loved ones in the country house, set the table, and invited friends and relatives. Maria was there, helping her father-in-law entertain the guests, while Bernardo accepted congratulations and smiled, observing all the friendly hustle. At some point, he received a message on his phone. "Hello, this is Magnolia. I've been accepted into university. I'll start studying soon." "Thank you so much." He smiled, replied with a few warm words, and put his phone in his pocket. After drinking some red wine, he went out onto the terrace. The warm company continued to enjoy themselves inside, while he stepped aside for a moment to catch his breath and reflect on how his life had changed over the past few months. How the seemingly absurd and ridiculous phrase "check your wife's bag" had become the trigger to expose a dangerous blackmailer, strengthen family ties, find new meanings in life, and help people like Magnolia. And all this without any mysticism, just logic, coincidence, and the keen attention of different people. Maria approached him and hugged him from behind. "What are you thinking about?" "Just remembering what we've been through." He turned around, kissed her forehead, "and I'm happy that we overcame it all." She smiled in response. "We've become stronger, and I think we're truly a team now." They stood together for a moment, enjoying the feeling of unity. Then Bernardo said, "Let's go back to the guests. Dad will be upset if we're not there when the feast starts." "Let's go." They returned to the living room, full of laughter and conversation, glasses sparkling in the golden light. The center of attention was Antonio Garcia, saying something funny to his friends. Meanwhile, Maria moved among the guests, pouring drinks and telling stories about the charity projects they were now working on. Bernardo felt truly happy. Of course, anything could lie ahead: business risks, stress, disagreements. But now he no longer doubted that any challenges could be overcome if they acted together and didn't hide their problems. As the evening drew to a close, guests began to head home, and his father, tired, sank into a chair, smiling contentedly. It's really nice to live when your loved ones are nearby. Remember, Bernardo, that nothing in life is more valuable than the trust and love of those who are close to you. Bernardo glanced at Maria and answered, "Yes, Dad, I definitely know that now." Slowly and imperceptibly, life returned to a calm course. In Bernardo's office, everything went as usual. Large business expansion projects were progressing steadily. He decided to participate less in social events, but when he did, Maria was always by his side, and they appeared as a harmonious couple who, despite the rumors and gossip, managed to maintain a strong relationship. Many ill-wishers were surprised. How's that possible? We thought they'd break up or end up in a scandal. But nothing of the sort happened. Time passed, and soon their new charity initiative, the Fund for Supporting Young Talents, began its work. Maria led it, while Bernardo supervised the financial side, helping to establish contacts with businessmen. The opening of the fund was accompanied by a small reception where journalists were invited. Bernardo gave a speech about the importance of helping the younger generation who lacked resources. Maria, standing next to him, beamed with pride. Soon, a modest girl from the crowd stepped forward and asked Maria, "Will you really help us pay for tuition?" To which she smiled and replied, "Yes, if you have the desire and ability, we can support you. We don't give empty promises." Bernardo looked at this scene, and a warm feeling filled him inside. It had all started with a seemingly absurd warning about the bag, and if it hadn't been for that strange encounter, perhaps the blackmailer would have succeeded, and life would have taken a completely different turn. Later, when they were returning home, he said to Maria, "You know, sometimes it's helpful to pay attention to the little details that seem ridiculous. That check your wife's bag incident seemed random, but how glad I am that I listened." Maria nodded. "Yes, it saved us from bigger problems." They drove up to their house, entered the spacious lobby, where they were greeted by the same maid, Pamela, with a smile. "How did it go?" "Perfect." They answered almost simultaneously and laughed, looking at each other. That evening, Bernardo, sitting in his office, reflected on how events can change a person, how small details can influence life. He remembered the tension, doubts, and fear that had overwhelmed him a few months ago, and realized that now he felt gratitude to Magnolia, to his friends and partners who helped, to his wife who had dared to admit everything. Sometimes, fighting external threats becomes a trigger for internal growth. Running his hand over the desk, he noticed the same envelope that had once been found in Maria's bag. All the compromising papers had been removed, leaving only a couple of unnecessary sheets. Bernardo took the envelope, tore it in half, and threw it into the trash. "We won't need this anymore," he said to himself. Suddenly, the door to his office opened slightly, and Maria peeked in. "Are you going to sleep?" "Yes, I'll finish now." He looked at her warmly. "Don't forget anything in your bag." She smiled, catching the hint, and shook her head. "No, in my bag, I only have lipstick and your spare phone. No more secrets." Bernardo chuckled softly and stood up to go with her. Inside, there was no space left for fear and distrust. He knew that now they were truly walking hand in hand. And so ended their difficult story, which began with the unexpected warning of a young fortune teller at the hospital exit. And although it wasn't mystical, it all ended for the best thanks to a chain of circumstances and the sincere desire of people to help each other. Each had learned their lesson. Bernardo learned to value family relationships and react to warning signs in time. Maria realized the value of trust and honesty. Magnolia got a chance for a decent future, and the enemy Daniel paid for his deceit and blackmail. The most important thing was that now, after all these events, Bernardo and Maria could look forward to the future, holding each other's hands and no longer fearing any more envelopes with threats. For each of them understood, as long as they were together and didn't lie to each other, they could overcome any trials.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.